This video, this entire channel actually, is my response to the impending demise of human civilization, which causes me a great deal of grief. In case you haven't noticed, things are really bad. Did you know that in 2015, suicide was the second leading cause of death for young Americans aged 15 to 24, and the third leading cause of death for those between the ages of 10 and 14? This is absolutely shocking, and the suicide rates continue to rise. From soaring suicide rates to widespread depression, anxiety, addiction, and violence, to climate change and parts of our planet becoming uninhabitable within the next couple of decades, we are in big trouble. What does any of this have to do with dogs, you ask? Dogs are a monument to the selfishness of humanity. They symbolize all that is wrong with humans, the attitude of, I'll do what I want for my own personal enjoyment without any regard for how it affects my neighbors, the society as a whole, or the planet. Until people change their attitudes towards dog ownership, these problems we are facing are not going anywhere. How can you argue with people who believe dogs and humans have equal value? There are many such people out there. There are even people who believe dogs have more value than humans. They will say dogs are better than humans because they are more pure, innocent, loyal, and they love unconditionally. In my experience, a lot of these people are vegan, child-free, anti-natalist misanthropes. When I was younger, I hated kids. I used to say I was never going to get married or have children. Kids were extremely irritating, rude, loud, demanding, out of control, whiny, snotty, throwing temper tantrums, hyper, just a nightmare. I wanted nothing to do with them. In my early 20s, I expressed these feelings to a colleague who looked at me with sadness and bewilderment and told me that if I hate kids, I hate life. I remember thinking he was a jerk for saying that. He shook his head in disbelief when I referred to my cat as a baby. I remember thinking he was cold-hearted for hating animals. When I became a vegetarian in my late teens, I started to really hate humans, and in some ways I still do. My eyes are open to all the cruelty in the world, to all the horrific ways we torture and kill animals unnecessarily, the damage we're doing to the environment, the way we are driving species to extinction, cutting down forests, killing our oceans, and polluting our air. I see how stupid, cruel, selfish, and greedy humans are, how we are waging war on each other for the most ridiculous reasons, torturing and killing each other needlessly. And I see the intolerance, the racism, misogyny, homophobia, and the violence, and all of it makes me sick. All the abuse, all the pain and mayhem, all of it disgusts me and makes me angry. For many years I used to say my cat doesn't do those things, and because my cat doesn't do those things, he's better than humans. Other people lied to me, hurt me, and let me down. Pets were better because they would never do that. In my late 20s, I met the man who would become my husband, and that was the turning point for me. Prior to meeting him, all of my romantic relationships had been dysfunctional. But I had done some work on myself. I sought help for my addictions and I confronted my past traumas. I began to understand the destructive patterns I was repeating in my relationships. And I had a sincere desire to change. I sought help and I worked hard on myself. I made huge changes in my life that were not easy to make. I ended toxic relationships and cut ties with people who were dragging me down. I invited new and healthier people into my life, and for the first time I felt safe and truly loved. It was beyond anything I'd ever experienced before. And finding myself in a healthy romantic relationship with a healthy person for the very first time was scary because it was so unfamiliar, but it felt great. And for the first time in my life I felt secure and at ease, free to be myself, and I was being loved for who I was. I was no longer struggling financially, and I no longer felt tortured by the demons of my past. And one day, while looking into his eyes on a train to Paris, I uttered the words I never imagined I would say. I told him I wanted to have his babies. I felt so much love for him, love I had never experienced before. And looking into his blue eyes, I wondered, with my brown eyes, what color eyes our kids might have. I gazed upon his handsome face, feeling so much love for him, and I wondered what features our children would have. How magical and incredible it would be to create a being that would be a mix of both of us, an extension of my DNA and his. If we would have a baby, what would it look like? What would it sound like? What would its personality be like? And what traits would it have? If it was a girl, would she look like my mother who had recently passed away? Would she have my mother's musical ability, a trait that runs in my family? What would her laughter sound like? Would she have an interest in medicine, something that runs in my husband's family? I began to feel a sense of wonder and excitement I had never experienced before. Shortly thereafter, I did become pregnant, and feeling my baby move inside of me was the most incredible feeling in the world. It's something I had never experienced with a dog or a cat, and I had been an animal lover all my life. This being was a part of me and a part of the man I loved. A pet would never have the ability to make me feel this way. The anticipation and feelings of wonder were unbelievable. When my daughter was born, it was simply glorious. To finally look into her eyes was an experience words can't describe. It's something I would never be able to experience with any dog or cat, not by a long shot. The cat that was my baby quickly took a back seat to this utterly miraculous being. When I looked into her eyes, there was something there that simply isn't to be found in the eyes of a dog or a cat. An infinite depth. She was human, a person, a human being with her own mind and infinite potential, a person with her own will, who I would one day be able to sit down and have a conversation with. What sort of conversation can you have with a dog or a cat? What potential do they have? Humans are so much more complex than dogs because they have bigger brains. I'll keep this about dogs from now on, but it also applies to cats and other animals as well. While dogs are driven by instinct, humans with their much larger frontal lobes have a dimension to them which dogs lack. The frontal lobe is the part of the brain that controls important cognitive skills such as emotional expression, problem solving, memory, language, judgment, and sexual behaviors. It is, in essence, the control panel of our personality and our ability to communicate. It's because of our frontal lobes that humans are miles ahead of dogs in so many ways. Maintaining a relationship with a human is challenging because humans are so complex. Humans can question you and disagree with you. They can talk back. They will challenge you. They will let you down in ways dogs can't because dogs simply lack the ability to do any of these things. For people who don't want to take a chance or put in the effort required to maintain a relationship with a human, dogs are appealing because they're so much simpler than humans. They won't question you or disagree with you, but the rewards you experience in a relationship with a dog are imaginary. As I explained in my video about how dogs don't smile or love you, dogs don't love you because they're not capable of experiencing love. As one of my viewers, Kitten6363, pointed out in the comments, Harvard psychologist Martha Stout, PhD, explains in her book entitled The Sociopath Next Door, The Ruthless versus the Rest of Us, that sociopaths possess no conscience. They have no ability whatsoever to feel shame, guilt, or remorse. She explains that 1 in 25 everyday Americans is secretly a sociopath. She explains sociopaths are different from the majority of people because they cannot love. They can't love, she says, because they are unable to feel shame, guilt, or remorse. An article from Psychology Today shows that dogs are incapable of feeling shame, pride, guilt, or contempt. The same information can be found on many other websites, including moderndogmagazine.com and other dog-loving websites. Because dogs are unable to feel shame or guilt, they are essentially sociopaths and are unable to experience love. Like sociopaths, dogs are able to display charming, manipulative behaviors that may fool you into thinking they love you, but they are incapable of experiencing the emotion of love, and their motives are purely selfish. You're essentially sharing your home with a sociopath that doesn't wear underwear, shits right in front of you, and humps your leg because it has no decency, no shame, and no self-control. In these infographics, affection is listed together with love, but these are two very different things which are grouped together because dog lovers desperately want to believe endearing dog behaviors or surges of oxytocin prove your dog loves you. In my video about how dogs don't smile or love you, I explain how the excited tail wagging, licking, and jumping are not evidence that the dog loves you. These behaviors indicate that the dog wants food, nothing more. They are remnants of juvenile wolf behaviors. Juvenile wolves react this way when adult wolves return from a hunt. They lick around the faces of the adult wolves because doing so prompts the adults to regurgitate food, which the juveniles then eat. Your dog licks you because it's trying to make you vomit. It wants you to vomit so it can eat your vomit. Because they are purely instinct-driven and because of their tiny frontal lobes, dogs are only motivated by and interested in food. They are scavengers with a never-ending appetite, and humans have fooled themselves into believing these food-seeking behaviors are the dog's way of showing love, but it is not love. Dogs are incapable of love. This is further demonstrated in the behavior of mother wolves, who, if they sense that one of their new cubs is behaving in a way that is not beneficial for the pack, will kill it and eat it in order to get rid of it and gain extra calories to make milk for the others. It is ruthless and cold-hearted. In the animal world, things are done for practical reasons, not out of love. Wolves will sometimes kill and eat sick or injured members of the pack. Dogs, which are descended from wolves, will eat your face after you die without a thought, because they are unable to think. They operate solely on instinct. As I explained in a previous video, if you die at home with your dog, even if it has access to dog food, it will look at you, see a warm bloody meal, and eat you, usually starting with your face. This is not the behavior of someone who loves you. This is what separates humans from other animals. Humans have a sense of right and wrong which animals lack. We have empathy and a conscience, while they do not. Now, of course, there are humans that kill their babies and abuse their kids. There are people who commit horrible acts of violence. These people are perhaps in the 4% of the population that lack a conscience and are sociopaths, or they suffer from other forms of mental illness. In the aforementioned book, the author explains how, under the influence of a group, mob mentality sets in, and even people with a conscience can have their conscience temporarily put to sleep. When a person commits a terrible act of violence against another human, they are often mentally ill or they've suffered some sort of trauma in their past. I'm sure you've heard the expression, hurt people hurt people. People who abuse others were abused themselves. Dogs do not have to be abused in order to act violently. Because they are instinct-driven, dogs often display predatory aggression and will chase and attack people or other animals due to their inborn predatory instinct, even when they were raised in loving homes by responsible owners. They don't have to be abused to show food aggression, and many dogs will bite you if you come too close to them while they are eating. Healthy humans will not punch you in the face if you reach over to grab the ketchup. Dogs show fear aggression. There are cases of healthy, happy dogs attacking, disfiguring, dismembering, and killing people simply because they were startled by the sound of a cough or a sudden movement. Healthy humans will not do that. Dogs will attack you simply because they are in pain. Dogs also redirect their aggression. So if a dog wants to attack a human or an animal and is unable to get to that animal or human for whatever reason, it will often redirect its aggression, turn around, and attack you instead. Healthy humans do not behave this way. There are a lot of nasty kids out there, but that's only because their parents did a poor job raising them. But it doesn't matter how dogs are raised. Dogs aren't human. Their brains are much smaller and simpler. Because humans have much larger frontal lobes, we are not driven solely by instinct like dogs are. Much of what we do is based on our thoughts and beliefs about ourselves and the world around us. Because of this, our upbringings play a very important role in determining our behaviors. Because our early experiences shape our personalities and beliefs. Dogs do not have the brain power to think or construct beliefs like we do. They simply act on instinct. Because of our bigger brains, we think about things. We can better control our behaviors. We can manage our anger and control our impulses. We can act in a more civilized manner than dogs can. We can think ahead. We can plan. We can set goals and work towards them. We can genuinely care for the well-being of others without hoping for anything in return. Dogs will never provide the comfort of a hug. Humans are designed by nature to enjoy hugs, and dogs don't like hugs. Hugging your dog stresses it out. An article from Psychology Today explains how behaviorists believe that depriving dogs of the freedom to run away by immobilizing them with a hug can increase their stress level. And if the dog's anxiety becomes significantly intense, they can bite. So quit hugging the dog and go hug a human. Children love to give and receive hugs. Human relationships are not easy to navigate, but people who don't put effort into human relationships are truly missing out. Dogs cannot provide the rewards that come with healthy human relationships, such as having someone get to know you, really know you, and still love you. Dogs can recognize you and know your scent and the sound of your voice, but they will never understand you the way another human can. They'll never understand your sorrows, your fears, hopes, dreams, values, beliefs, attitudes, hobbies, or interests. They will never be able to exchange ideas with you. They'll never be able to truly listen to you. You can pour your heart out to them, but because they don't understand you and because they can't talk back, this lack of two-way communication makes it impossible to share a bond or to be truly connected to them. The relationship is empty, barren, imaginary, a fantasy. Having a dog is like having a stuffed animal and pretending it loves you. It's completely delusional. Dogs do not love you any more than a stuffed animal does. A dog will show the same affectionate behaviors to a serial killer as it shows to you. It has no discernment. Its affection, therefore, has no value whatsoever. It isn't with you because it enjoys your company or thinks you're a nice person. It's with you because you keep a collar and a leash on it and imprison it in your house. It's essentially a slave. If it is a free-ranging dog and it comes back to you, it's only because you provide it with food. It's only motivated by food. Imagine having a friend who only wanted to spend time with you because you fed them. What a lousy friend that would be. When a human being chooses to spend their time with you, it's a true honor. A true friend will help you out, even if you don't provide them with a free meal. And that is what makes their friendship much more valuable than any relationship you could have with a dog. Now, my husband and I choose to raise our children differently from the way most parents raise their kids because we observed other children, we examined the way our culture teaches us to raise kids, and after a lot of thought and research, we determined the way we are told to raise children is not the best way. Western society is very sick, and as a result, most people's kids are sick. Marriage has somehow become disposable in the last few decades, and my kids seem to have more friends who come from broken homes than not. It's estimated that 48% of American and British children live in divorced single-parent homes by the age of 16. Divorce is devastating to children and often leads to many behavioral problems, including clinging, whining, and tantrums in young children. Adolescents often respond to divorce by becoming rebellious and defiant. Some kids bounce back, but others never really seem to go back to normal. This small percentage of children may experience ongoing and possibly even lifelong problems after their parents' divorce. We need to look at the causes of divorce and do something to lower divorce rates. That really needs to be a top priority, and it isn't. Living in our consumerist society, we're programmed to view things as disposable and replaceable, to ditch the old stuff for the next best thing. We're lazy. We want instant gratification. We are given an unrealistic idea of what love is. It's suggested that the honeymoon phase should last forever. It doesn't. We value superficial things. People get together for superficial reasons and ultimately don't stay together because there's no real substance to their relationship. We need to look at what's gone wrong and why half of all families don't stay together anymore. It's an epidemic and we need to treat it as such. A healthy home and family environment is crucial when it comes to raising healthy kids. If the parents are not financially or psychologically stable, this will have a huge effect on how the children develop. Early attachment between babies and their caregivers is crucial in producing a healthy human being. If a baby or young child is deprived of loving attachment with a stable caregiver, they can develop attachment disorders with symptoms which, if left untreated, can carry on into adolescence and adulthood. Symptoms such as defiant behaviors. What people fail to see is that these children are hurting. They need help. They need love. What they do not need or deserve is your contempt. We should not be asking what's wrong with this child, but rather what happened to this child. Adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs, are childhood traumas that can have devastating and lifelong effects on people. They can cause mental illness, violence, addiction, risky behaviors, unwanted pregnancy. The list goes on. Losing a parent to divorce, witnessing a parent being abused, a household member who's an alcoholic or drug user, or who's been imprisoned, or suffers from mental illness, all are traumas that can have horrible negative effects on children, which result in them displaying these so-called problem behaviors. Many of these children are then forced by their parents and doctors to take prescription medications to manage their behaviors, medications which come with side effects. It's truly a nightmare, a huge injustice. We should be looking at the way we raise kids and addressing the cause of their troubling behaviors. Instead of masking them with drugs, we need to put the blame where the blame belongs, and it's not on the kids. There are studies showing a link between the amount of time children spend in daycare and behavioral problems such as aggression and disruptive behavior, weak social skills, weaker parental attachment, and greater risk of anxiety and depression. The more time they spend in daycare, the higher the likelihood of them having these problems. This is something we need to look more closely at and question. People told us we should let our baby, quote, cry it out so that she could learn to self-soothe, but that didn't feel right, so we didn't do that. We had heard about attachment parenting, which, to quote from the attachmentparenting.org website, promotes parenting practices that create strong, healthy emotional bonds between children and their parents for life, so they can take those bonds with them into their adult lives and share them with their children, and their children can do the same. A life of compassion and connection, end quote. Now, if more parents adopted this philosophy, I strongly believe there would be a lot more compassion in the world, a lot less selfishness, a lot less pain. There would be less greed, less harm being done to others and to the environment. You don't see gorillas or chimpanzees letting their babies cry themselves to sleep. Why do humans do this? It is so unnatural. We learned something about spanking. We learned that it leads to an increased risk of mental health problems, problems with self-esteem and addiction later in life. So we chose not to spank our kids. Louis C.K., a comedian I enjoy listening to, said it best. He said, quote, "I really think it's crazy that we hit our kids. It really is. Here's the crazy thing about it. Kids are the only people in the world that you're allowed to hit. Do you realize that? They are the most vulnerable, and they are the most destroyed by being hit, but it's totally okay to hit them. And they're the only ones. If you hit a dog, they fucking will put you in jail for that shit. You can't hit a person unless you can prove that they were trying to kill you. But a tiny little person with a head this big that trusts you implicitly, fuck them, who gives a shit?" End quote. It's just common sense to us, but scientific research also shows there's no evidence that spanking does any good, and all evidence points to the risk of it doing harm. Kids who are spanked have more problems with aggression, parental trust, and intimacy. It destroys mental health, increases delinquency, antisocial and criminal behavior. It erodes developmental growth and decreases IQ. So we decided not to spank our kids. We explored healthier ways of disciplining them, only to find that because of the way we were raising our children, they rarely, if ever, misbehaved. I honestly cannot remember a single instance where I felt our kids needed to be disciplined. I know you're going to find that hard to believe, but it's true. We ignored the way others raised their kids and chose to follow our instincts, and our instincts resonated with the views of authors such as John Holt, an American educator and pioneer in youth rights theory. We learned about something called childism. Childism is the radical notion that kids need to be respected as human beings. Childism could also be defined as the advocacy of the rights of children. The opposite force is adultism, a systemic condition that promotes stereotyping and disempowering of the young. As a culture, we are very prejudiced against children, and this has a huge effect on them and how they feel about themselves and behave in the world. To quote from an article on childism that I will link you to in the description box, you can likely see examples of childism every time you step out of the house or open up the internet. Every day, in many ways, children receive the message that they are less important, less deserving of respect, unequal, and inferior, whether we mean to send that message or not. It is so ingrained in our society, the majority don't even recognize it. It's every time a parent is asked, "Is she hungry?" or "Does she like strawberries?" instead of the question being directed at the child who's very capable of answering. It's every time a child's emotions elicit laughter instead of empathy. It's adults believing they have the right to physically punish people because of their age. It's a general intolerance for childish behavior, interfering with an adult's desires, and the view that children should be seen and not heard. It's adults making decisions about cosmetic alterations to their child's body, such as circumcision, ear piercing, haircuts, without consent. It's forced affection. It's whenever a child's photo is posted online in an effort to shame them. It's adults who believe they deserve automatic respect, most often defined as obedience, for nothing more than their greater age. It's every time children are talked about in a conversation as though they are not even in the room. It's rejoicing in their absence when it's back to school time. It's a world where there are books, TV shows, and blogs devoted to teaching parents how you can, quote, train your child, often by means of ignoring their needs. It's needing research to prove that abandoning a child so they will learn to, quote, self-settle is detrimental instead of just treating babies like humans. It's reading this list and dismissing it as, quote, over the top or ridiculous or not a big deal, end quote. My husband and I reject childism. Our kids enjoy rights and respect that most other kids do not enjoy. Our children are our top priority, and we let them know it. We cherish them more than anything. They know they are loved, and it shows. They never act out the way other kids do. We did not send them to school to be pushed through a one-size-fits-all education system that doesn't honor who they are as individuals. Instead, we enrolled them in an online independent school called Self-Design that celebrates their individuality. There is no curriculum. Each child participates in the creation of their own individualized learning plan. They get to choose what they want to study based on their own interests. I could spend all day talking about this as it's something I am so passionate about. Self-Design is such a brilliant program, and we've been doing it for 10 years now. I cannot say enough good things about it. I know such programs do not exist everywhere, but they need to. There should be universal access to this form of learner-led education that empowers children. We should all be lobbying for it. Everyone who meets my kids, from coaches to teachers to strangers, comments on how bright, happy, sociable, confident, conscientious, compassionate, kind, and extraordinary they are. They shine like diamonds. Imagine if all kids had the luxury of being raised this way. What amazing contributions they would bring to society. What an incredible, peaceful, amazing world we would have. I've received a number of messages from young people who say their parents put them on the same level as the family dog, referring to the dog as their sibling. And these kids are hurting. They tell me how depressed they feel. They tell me they are angry. They tell me they feel outraged over the fact they are being compared to a shit-eating beast that lacks a conscience. My heart breaks for them. That adults blur the line between raising a child and owning a dog is the reason our kids are so messed up. If even half of the time, energy, and resources that are spent on dogs was instead redirected towards children, I am sure our society would not be in the shambles it's in. If all of the time, energy, and resources we spend on dogs was instead spent on kids, imagine how great children would be turning out. If people glorified children the way they do dogs, if they praised children for their very appearance, if we got excited at the mere sight of children like we do with dogs, if we lavished children with the affection and adoration we show to dogs, and created Twitter accounts for them, Facebook groups dedicated to praising them and so forth, like we do with dogs, imagine how differently they would turn out, knowing they are so appreciated and so highly valued. My children make me birthday cards and draw me pictures. Dogs will never create art or write poems. My children help with chores around the house. Dogs can't do that. You'll never watch your dog work cooperatively with other dogs to build a pirate ship out of popsicle sticks. My daughter did indeed inherit my mother's musical ability and performed at an open mic at the age of 13 after teaching herself to play songs on the guitar and ukulele, and even composing her own original song, which she sang and had the entire audience singing to. A dog will never do that. Children are witty and funny and can crack clever jokes. They think so creatively, so out of the box, and are true geniuses. My 6-year-old asked me the other day, "Mom, do you know why it's called a liver?" Because it lets you live. A dog would never come up with stuff like that. My 12-year-old is coding and creating his own video games and digital music. Dogs can't do any of these amazing things, which delight me every day and make me so proud. All of my kids have tremendous respect for the earth and the natural world. My 3 children are all influencing their friends to eat more plant-based foods, and in this way, they are already raising awareness and making the world a better place by setting an example and encouraging others to reduce their carbon footprint. My daughter hasn't even finished her probationary period at her new job working at the grocery store, and already she was nominated as one of the top 3 cashiers of the month and approached by her boss who thinks she is ready to specialize in the bakery department. My kids are the most loving, compassionate, sensitive beings I've ever known. Unlike dogs, they genuinely smile and are truly capable of feeling and expressing love, which they do every day, towards us and towards their friends, in acts of kindness that would melt your heart if you would get to know them. They are respectful, attentive, they have positive attitudes, supreme social skills, and manners that go above and beyond those of their peers. They aren't your average kids because we are not your average parents. I am not telling you this to brag, but to let you know there's a different way to raise kids that results in them being far less annoying than the stereotypical bratty kid that child-free, antinatalist, pro-dog, misanthropic vegans say they hate. I'm not suggesting everyone have kids. Far from it. Being a parent is not for everyone. In fact, I think people need to be dissuaded from breeding. Far too many people are having kids they are ill-prepared to raise. Because of religion and the stigma of abortion, too many people are being pressured into having children they don't want or are unable to properly care for. Too many children are in foster care, suffering from the attachment issues I mentioned earlier. A lot of people don't realize adoption is a trauma of loss and separation for both mother and baby that can result in PTSD. If we truly want less suffering in the world, we should encourage pregnant women to abort their unwanted babies instead of guilting them into giving birth. The world has too many unwanted, damaged people in it already. And that is why society is in the state it's in. Before a child is born, the parents need to really want to have a baby. The babies need to be wanted and cherished by their parents. We need to promote abortion as a social good. People want to bring life into the world at all costs, but they aren't thinking about the quality of that child's life. They don't consider the negative impact unwanted children have on society. We should distribute birth control freely to everyone. Having children should be a privilege we earn. I'm not exactly sure how this would play out, but I sometimes imagine a system where couples would be required to have a license to breed. Perhaps everyone should be sterilized at birth and have the sterilization procedure reversed once they can demonstrate they would be good parents. Too many people are having babies they are not equipped to raise properly, and society, as well as the environment, is paying a very heavy price for it. We urgently need to come up with a solution, but until we devise a system to ethically control who gets to breed, if that is even possible, we need to change our attitudes regarding parenthood and recognize it as the most important job in the world by far. First and foremost, childism needs to be exposed and done away with. We need to drastically change the way we view and treat children. If you feel no desire to have children, or if you are not emotionally, mentally, or financially prepared to provide a child with a healthy upbringing, please don't have children. But please don't put them on the same level as dogs. Don't get on board the child hate train. If you feel you hate children, ask yourself why, and recognize that it's the behaviors you hate, behaviors children display when they are hurting. Healthy children do not behave that way. Realize these annoying children are damaged and desperately need love. Consider looking into a Big Brother, Big Sister program where you can mentor a child and be a positive influence in their life. This would be way more rewarding than buying a dog, and you would make a positive difference in that child's life, which in turn would make a positive difference in the world. I cannot force people to see the value of kids if they do not see kids as valuable. However you feel about children or dogs, surely you must see that dogs will not uphold our civilization after we die, but children will. Children, therefore, are the only hope there is for humanity. Being the only hope for the continuation of our species, they are more valuable than any other animal in my eyes, but I know some of you will argue that our species is no more important than any other species. In fact, some of you misanthropes will say, it's best for our species to die out. To this, I can only point out how unnatural it is for a social animal to not place the value of one's own species above all others, because no other animal on earth has this self-defeating, self-loathing, self-destructive attitude. No other animal jeopardizes its safety or the safety of its offspring by tolerating the presence of potentially dangerous predators in its territory. It is unnatural and perverse to divert resources and attention away from our offspring, to shower them onto another species, especially when that other species is regularly attacking, disfiguring, and killing our children like dogs are. Whenever someone defends dogs or argues that we should maintain the presence of dogs in our society, what they are really saying is that they don't care about children. If you want dogs in society, you don't care about kids. Simple as that. If you cared about children, you would not want to put them at risk, and dogs are a huge risk to kids. If you hate kids, I think you might be someone who suffers from mental health issues as I once did. As my old work colleague said, if you hate kids, you hate life. He was right. It was only after I got help and learned to deal with my mental health issues and overcome them that I came around to loving children and seeing how absolutely miraculous they are.